Sixers fans, how we feeling out there? Hey y'all, my name is Lauren Gordon. Some of you may already know me on social media as Lauren Fan of the Year. Others may have just stumbled upon this podcast, but either way, I want to first thank all of you for tuning in to Season 3, Episode 13 of my very first podcast. I'm just a Sixers fan, the Lauren Fan of the Year story. Now let's continue the story. Y'all, the time is now April 28, 2022. After being up in the first round playoff series 3-0, we were headed to Game 6 after the Raptors won 2 back-to-back games in Games 4 and 5. The worst part about losing Game 5 was having to wait for Game 6. I had to sit in that icky loss feeling for 3 days. I was extremely nervous because we weren't playing like the team that started out this series 3-0. We kind of regressed. In fact, Game 5 was probably the worst game I had seen us play. Game 6 would be in Toronto, and we had to play without one of our best defenders, Matisse Thybulle. Remember, he wasn't allowed in the Canadian borders because he was unvaccinated. We had to look at this game as a must-win game, and I did not want to go into a Game 7 situation. I was still haunted by Game 7 elimination games that didn't work in our favor. Just the thought of losing this game and even losing this series would be devastating, especially after being up 3-0. I'm not going to lie, y'all, I was nervous. I didn't know which Sixers team was going to show up for Game 6. Doc Rivers had to outcoach Nick Nurse on the road. James Harden had to be more assertive. He only shot 11 times in Game 5. I needed more from the Beard. I was concerned that his nagging hamstring was now a thing, again. Tobias was the most consistent player on our squad, but I wanted him to pick it up a little bit more. I wanted something different drawn up for Tyrese Maxey because I felt like Nick Nurse, the Toronto Raptors head coach, had figured out ways to slow Maxey down. The Raptors couldn't completely shut down Tyrese, but they certainly made him fight for every bucket. Maxey was still the fastest player on the court, though. And I felt good about Danny Green, who had been saving a lot in his tank during the regular season, but now he was turning it up. But at the end of the day, it all came down to Joel Embiid, who in the last game was seen holding his thumb. It may be injured. But y'all, at the end of the day, I had no sympathy for Embiid. I'm like, it's a thumb, suck it up. In fact, y'all, I was low-key annoyed with Embiid. I thought, big baby, I swear if Joel comes out at the start of this game with his shoulders slouched, moping, holding that thumb, I am going to lose it. Like I said, I had no sympathy for him. Y'all remember, I grew up watching Sixers greats like Dr. J, Moses Malone, Allen frickin' Iverson, even players who were just cold like Kobe Bryant, Reggie Miller. In a game like this, players would wrap that thumb and keep it moving. Yeah, they may be in pain, but they would never show it. Not when the game was on the line like this, and especially if they knew it brought the energy down for their teammates. Now, let me be clear. It wasn't Embiid's injuries that made me resent him. It's his mopiness and the up and down mood swings. He could be playing to the crowd, looking like he's having fun, and then in the next game, you see him acting like a fragile flower, moping around, and y'all, it bothered me. As the leader of the team, I needed Joel to lead by example and show that he was ready to play. His teammates, the fans, Even the opposing players read his body language. I needed Joel to go out on the floor with confidence. I know Embiid remembered that horrible feeling after being eliminated in Toronto in Game 7 in 2019. Y'all know when Kawhi Leonard's quadruple doink shot went in and we were eliminated and they advanced in that series. Well, the Toronto Raptors went on to win a championship that year under Coach Nick Nurse. And I was thinking this would be a big moment for Joel to help us get out of the second round by beating the Toronto Raptors to avenge that horrible, horrible moment back in 2019. That moment forever haunted all of us Sixers fans. We had an opportunity, and I just wanted to eliminate the Toronto Raptors. Round 1, Game 6 in Toronto. I noticed early in the game that Embiid and Harden weren't getting the foul calls, to go to the free throw line. I was like, this is going to be interesting because a lot of their points came from shooting free throws. But then I felt like we started playing Sixers basketball and looked more like ourselves. I was feeling optimistic, especially when James Harden had a dunk. It released all of the doubt I had about him nursing his hamstring. He was explosive, and he showed that he, too, still had a lot left in his tank. Danny Green made some clutch threes. Tyrese Maxey was feeling it, and he gave us the spark that we needed. But y'all, get this. Joel Embiid had this amazing dunk at the end of the game, and y'all, in celebration, he extended his arms to airplane across the court. You know how when you're like a little kid and you put your arms out and you're just like, as if you're flying, right? This was the happy Joel having fun out there playing to the crowd, just like I had mentioned earlier, right? Y'all, Joel was happy. So as a fan, I was happy. Seeing that Embiid dunk also relieved my concern for his injured thumb, because I was thinking, if his thumb was really bothering him, he would not have jammed that ball through that rim like he did. And then, y'all, in the closing minutes of the game, Toronto Raptors player Pascal Siakam elbowed Embiid in the face with a hard foul. He was probably pissed off that Embiid was out there airplaning, showboating all over the court, just to annoy the Toronto Raptors fans. At the time, I thought it was a dirty play, but I didn't think anything more beyond that. I get it, because I remembered how I felt as a fan when I saw Giannis Antetokounmpo showboating in our arena after a loss. It feels like disrespect. I was like, oh well, Siakam is a sore loser. He's salty because his Toronto Raptors have been eliminated. But I didn't care. I was happy because my guys were out there having fun to win this game on the road. I yelled, play the song. I couldn't believe it. We won Game 6, blowing out the Toronto Raptors 132-97, eliminating them from the playoffs. We won the first round series 4-2. Our Philadelphia 76ers advanced to the second round and would now face the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, the Miami Heat. Later that evening, there was breaking news. Joel Embiid suffered a right orbital fracture and a mild concussion in last night's series win in Toronto. He will be listed as out, and there is no timetable for his return, per Shams Charania. I was like, what the fudge? Like, why? Y'all, I was ready to cry. My Facebook friends began to flood my timeline with comments like, it was that dirty play by Siakam. And I saw comments like, Embiid is Mr. Glass. This always happens. And of course, I saw messages like, I told you we're cursed. I didn't want to think that Pascal Siakam elbowed Embiid intentionally in the face. They were both from Cameroon. He could have been frustrated after the realization that his Toronto Raptors team were on the brink of elimination, but I'd like to think he wasn't intentionally trying to break Embiid's orbital bone. I blame the refs for not calling the blatant fouls throughout the game. I blame Doc Rivers for keeping Embiid late in the game when we had such a big lead. But at the same time, Nick Nurse kept his starters late in the game, and he wasn't surrendering. So I get it. Like, when you have a big lead, you have to keep your foot on the gas. We couldn't risk benching our starters too early and allowing the Raptors starters any chance to swallow up that lead while our starters were still on the bench. I don't know. I was just like, damn, this situation with Embiid and Siakam could have been avoided. As Sixers fans, we were all sick. I felt a huge knot in the pit of my stomach. How are we going to beat the number 1 seed Miami Heat without our best player? I joined a podcast with my friends Jay Fragger and Donald Anderson. We debated a lot of topics, but we all agreed that when and if Joel Embiid is healthy, we can beat anybody. But now what? And y'all, it was also around this time when I started getting introduced to podcasting. Anytime Jay, Donald, and even Jason asked me if I wanted to hop on a podcast to talk Sixers, I was always down. And now we were talking about how it was speculated that Joel Embiid was going to miss at least 1 game. I thought, okay, not bad. Like, it could have been a lot worse. We just had to figure out a way to win 1 game without Joel. And y'all, we've played without Embiid before, and we've won. And as Joel's backup, I preferred the young, athletic BBall Paul, Paul Reed, over DeAndre Jordan or even Paul Millsap, who was our backup centers. BBall Paul had been playing well for us. In fact, I almost forgot and just remembered, just a few weeks prior, on April 10th, BBall played a spectacular regular season game against the Indiana Pacers, and when the media asked Coach Doc Rivers during the press conference if BBall would get more playing time, Doc downplayed his efforts and said, quote, "We're not going to go on the Paul Reed victory tour, so don't start. We're trying to win a world championship, man," end quote. I was like, damn, Doc, so much for building confidence in your young players. And you know, it's funny how life works, because now, at this point, we were definitely on the Paul Reed victory tour if we wanted any chance to survive this series without Joel Embiid. It was later reported that the orbital bone injury did not require surgery, but obviously rest and protection was needed to prevent further damage. I was hoping Joel Embiid could take time off to just heal his injuries and at the same time rest his body, primarily his legs, his feet, his energy, and I hope that he could come back wearing a mask, but at least his body would be well rested. The Miami Heat was also facing injuries with Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. We just had to take it 1 day and 1 game at a time. I was looking at the round 2 playoff schedule and I was like, yeah, of course I'll be attending all the home games this series, but because the Heat had home court advantage, round 2, game 1 would be in Miami. I was like, I have to be there for game 1 to cheer on my guys. Shoot, I'm going to Miami. May 2nd, I arrived at Philadelphia International Airport to board my American Airlines flight to Miami. I love it because it's a quick little 2.5-hour flight, and I felt the warm Miami heat as soon as I left the terminal. The high for that day was 85 degrees. I couldn't believe it. I was in Miami, y'all. I checked the time and was like, oh, I would normally be in the office at this point. My work supervisor and coworkers knew my level of dedication, so no one was surprised when I told them why I needed to take PTO that day. I Ubered to my hotel, checked in, walked around downtown, grabbed some lunch at a nice little restaurant. Then I made my way to the FTX arena, took some selfies, then made a Sixers fans video, just letting my followers know that I was in Miami as I stood in front of the arena. I was glad I got there a little early so I knew exactly where to go later that evening for the game. The weather was gorgeous, and I took my time walking back to my hotel. I came back to my room exhausted. I laid across the bed, took a quick nap, then it was time to get ready for the game. I hopped in the shower to freshen up from all the travel and from walking around downtown. I threw on my blue Matisse Thybulle jersey and my denim shorts. I put on my favorite blue mirror lens sunglasses and then walked back over to the FTX arena. My friend Fred saw my Facebook post and messaged me saying that he and his buddy were also in Miami for the game and said, we have to meet up. I was so excited. Even though I travel by myself, it's always nice to see a familiar face on the road. I texted Fred back with, absolutely. Fred was my boy, and I could not wait to see him. So I stood there outside the arena, watching the crowd begin to grow, and then finally the doors opened. I went through security, showed my electronic ticket on my cell phone, and then I walked the concourse. I could not believe it. I was at my 11th arena. I felt euphoria, a giddiness, and happiness because it felt like a dream. It was also a Monday, and I would normally be just getting home from work at that time. But y'all, my ass was walking around in shorts in Miami to see my Sixers in a playoff game. I needed a break from work anyway, so this felt good. I was walking around the FTX arena and noticed lots of Sixers fans in the building. I would always give the finger point or throw both hands in the air and yell, "Go Sixers!" whenever I saw someone repping our squad. I ran into my friend Fred and his friend in the concourse. I can't remember his friend's name, but he was cool. Fred and I hugged, and we talked about our incoming flight that morning into Miami. And of course, we had to discuss Joel Embiid's injury and how him not playing could impact not just the game, not just the playoff series, but how it could impact our Sixers over the long haul. But I have to say that Fred and I were both very positive and very optimistic with our chances of beating the Miami Heat. We agreed to meet up again after the game. I was like, bet. We went in our opposite directions, and I decided to head down to my lower level seats. As I walked to the entrance of my section, I ran into Alan Horowitz, the Sixers sixth man. I gave him a huge hug, and we took a bunch of photos together. It was nice seeing him again, and this time it was on the road. As I said, it just feels comforting seeing another familiar face when traveling on the road. I headed down the steps, getting excited as I got closer and closer to the court. I sat in my seat, just a few rows from our Sixers bench, and I was taking in everything about the arena. The Jumbotron, the music, the fans. The arena started to fill quickly. Walking along the baseline, I noticed a beautiful girl, and I thought, oh my God, she looks so familiar. Then it hit me. That's Tyrese Maxey's sister. And y'all, sure enough, walking right behind her were Maxey's parents, Denise and Tyrone. I watched them while they weaved in and out of the crowds, and then I noticed they were getting closer and closer to where I was sitting. They settled into their seats just the next section over from me. Not one person recognized them. Remember, at this time, Tyrese Maxey was still a young player, and we were in Miami. but I knew who they were. I walked over to them, pointing to my shirt to show them that I was a Sixers fan. I had a big old grin on my face, and as I got closer, I said, "Hi, I'm Lauren. Are you Tyrese's parents?" They both smiled and said yes. They didn't seem annoyed that I walked over to them, so I just sat down in the empty seat in front of them. And I added, "I am a Sixers super fan, and I flew in from Philly this morning. I am also a huge fan of your son, Tyrese. He's my favorite player." And I had to tell them, I had a friend tell me all about Tyrese while he was at Kentucky, so I was very excited when we got him. Denise said, "Oh, okay, thank you." Then I realized that I told them that their son was my favorite player, yet here I was wearing Matisse Thybulle's jersey. So nervously, I added, "I would normally wear my Tyrese Maxey jersey to the games, but I decided to give Matisse Thybulle some love, considering he's now finally able to play in a playoff game on the road." Because remember, y'all, he couldn't play in Toronto in the last series because he wasn't vaccinated. So that was my little joke. And y'all, they actually laughed at me. And I remember thanking them for raising such a fine young man and letting them know that we were grateful to have Tyrese wearing a Sixers uniform. I said, "He may be your son, but he belongs to all of us in Philadelphia." They laughed again and were very engaging. They were a normal family. They kind of reminded me of my own family. Down to earth, approachable, super cool. I asked Denise and Tyrone Maxey if I could take a selfie with them, and they happily agreed. I thanked them both, told them to enjoy the game, and yelled, "Go Sixers!" as I walked back to my seat. I didn't want to overstay my welcome with the Maxies, and at the same time, y'all, I was trying to get ready for this game. I settled in as the players took the court for warm-ups. I was excited for the pregame stuff, and then finally, tip-off. The Miami Heat led at the end of the first quarter, 22-30. We were only down by 8 points. By halftime, we led by 1 point, 51-50. The second half of the game was pretty close. We made some clutch baskets, and I would cheer and clap my little heart out for our guys. Nothing too crazy, just a, "Yeah, Maxey," and a fist pump in the air. Then, all of a sudden, I felt splash. Y'all, the guy behind me knocked his beer over on me, and at first I thought it was an accident, but as he was apologizing, he and his buddy sitting next to him, they were cracking up. Like, I would be like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." But they were like, "Sorry," and they're laughing, and they were kind of drunk, and in a weird kind of way, I felt like they meant to do it. I looked dude right in his eyes, and with all seriousness, I said, "Well, what's so funny? Why are you laughing?" He apologized again with "sorry" and was still laughing, so nothing about it seemed sincere. Now I was annoyed because I didn't know if it was intentional or not, and now I had to smell like frickin' beer for the rest of the game. But then I reset. I wasn't going to allow that guy to ruin this game or my experience, so I just remained focused on the game. Tobias Harris played well. He was our leading scorer with 27 points. Tyrese Maxey had 10 points. James Harden had 16 points. But it wasn't enough. We lost round 2, game 1, against the Miami Heat, 92-106. Damn. This was the time when I was thinking having Joel Embiid out there would have made the difference. But anyway, y'all, when the game was winding down with like 5 minutes left, Fred messaged me, giving me details on where to meet in the concourse. I met up with him and his friend, and he said, "Lauren, you hanging out with us? We have a car, and we want to try this nice restaurant while we're here in Miami." I said, "Fred, I can't hang out with y'all. I smell like beer." And I went on to tell him what happened to me with the guy sitting behind me. Fred immediately said, "Well, where are you at?" And he started walking towards my section. There was probably a couple minutes left in the game, and old boy may have still been in his seat. But I told Fred, you know what, let it go. It's not worth it, and that I was fine. He kept saying, you sure? You sure? I was like, yeah, I'm good. And at that point, my shirt was dry, and the smell of beer wasn't strong, but I could still smell it. So I told Fred, I'm just going to head back to my hotel. And he was like, Lauren, you might as well hang out with us, and then we'll drop you off at your hotel and make sure you get back safe. I was like, you know what? I am hungry. So, okay, I'm down. As long as y'all are okay with me smelling like beer. He was like, you're fine. Y'all, let me tell you, me, Fred, and his friend, we were all over Miami. And we ended up at this nice Cuban restaurant. I had me a good shrimp and rice dish. It was delicious. Some cocktails, and we had a good old time. Good conversations, Sixers and non-Sixers topics. The food was amazing. We closed the place down. And when the bill came, I pulled out my little debit card, and Fred told me he was offended. He paid for my food and my drinks, y'all. Fred is like a brother to me. He wanted to make sure I was good. Afterwards, him and his buddy drove me to the entrance of my hotel. They watched me walk in and yelled out the window, call us if you need anything, before they pulled off. When I walked in my room, I looked at the time. I could not believe it was that late. I had to shower again before bed. Even with the loss and even with the whole beer thing, y'all, I was still grateful for this amazing experience. The fact that I could just hop on a plane, cheer on my Sixers in a playoff road game, have the opportunity to meet and chat with Tyrese Maxey's family, especially with Maxey being my favorite player, is just mind-blowing. I was living the life that I always dreamed of. And even though I was traveling alone, I wasn't alone. I am never alone. God always makes sure the right people are around me at the right time to make sure I'm good. It's a wonderful, reassuring feeling. I was content and my belly was full. It was a long day. I snuggled down in that cool white comforter and said a simple, thank you, God, before falling off to sleep. I was grateful for it all. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And join me next time as we continue the story.